What's up everyone, Tara Roberts here with FantasyPros bringing you my top 10 waiver wire ads for week 12. Before I get into the list, if you want a chance to win a glorious 36-inch fantasy championship trophy for your league, courtesy of our good friends at Trophy Smack, the #1 destination for epic fantasy tournament trophies, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on this video and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can claim your prize. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 10, Jeff Wilson. On the FantasyPros Sunday live show, I joked around with Chris Welsh that my early season take around Jeff Wilson being wildly irrelevant ended up being 100% correct. So understand that me putting Wilson on my top 10 waiver wire list is very painful, but I feel like it's necessary to include him just in case. Reports are that De'Von Achane felt like he could have returned to the game after he suffered a knee injury. So it might not be serious, but considering that he just came off IR for that knee injury, we need to consider it. Salvon Ahmed also suffered an injury as well, leaving Raheem Mostert as the only active back. So if Achane and Ahmed can't play, Wilson would have to be activated and would likely see some type of workload. And the Dolphins play the Jets, and no matter how amazing your receivers are, their secondary absolutely wreaks havoc and you have to push volume on the ground to help move the ball forward. Wilson is worth an ad, but only if both Achane and Ahmed can't play. Number 9, Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir has been on my waiver wire list before, and I like him again this week. Shakir has a clear role with Dawson Knox out and Dalton Kincaid taking on more of a typical tight end role. Last week was kind of a bust for the entire Bills receiving core, but Shakir has had a minimum of 9.7 fantasy points in 3 of the past 4 weeks. And this week he had a 3 reception game for 115 yards and a touchdown. A lot of that yardage was on one giant play, which is more of an outlier, but production is production and he has been solid. He is on a timeline. His clock runs out when Dawson Knox returns, and Knox is eligible next week, but we haven't really heard anything around his return. As long as Knox is out, roll with Shakir is a low-end flex option, especially next week against a very pass-friendly Philadelphia defense. Number 8, Rashawn Johnson. All Chicago backs were healthy in week 11, and it lasted not even half of the game before Donta Foreman went down with an injury. This backfield is messy. But the clear direction here is definitely a 3-man committee if everyone is healthy. And it's important to note that Foreman did have priority on his first drive and had the goal line touchdown as well. After he went down, the backfield was split between Khalil Herbert and Rashawn Johnson. Herbert had 6 carries for 35 yards and 2 receptions for 6 yards. Johnson had less work, 6 carries for 30 yards, but it was encouraging and he did look good. I don't think this backfield ultimately has true loyalty to any of the running backs. But if Johnson continues to perform better, he could earn more carries. And again, this is only an ad if Foreman's injury causes him to miss time. Number 7, Elijah Moore. Deshaun Watson is out for the remainder of the season, and we have to start re-evaluating the Browns' offense. Moore had a ton of promise heading into the season, finally escaping the Jets and being in a position to be the wide receiver 2 for Cleveland. And that did, in fact, pan out. But the Browns' offense has been wildly inconsistent, and so has the entire receiving core. But looking at the Browns' offense moving forward, if the Browns intend to start Dorian Thompson-Robinson rest of season, Moore might have the higher upside here. Cooper is undoubtedly the big play receiver in this offense, with Moore playing more of an underneath role. In fact, his 60-yard performance this week was his highest yardage total of the season. But in PPR, he's got a nice reception volume that will allow him to sit in that 10 to 15 fantasy point range and is a solid bench stash and a low-end flex option. Demario Douglas. Coming off the bye week, do not forget about Demario Douglas. Douglas may not have the upside of some of the receivers on this list, but he just might have the safest floor out of everyone. Douglas is the Patriots wide receiver 1, and while that is not the most exciting title in the world, it is worthy of a roster and flex consideration. The Patriots are on a bye week, so we'll look at weeks 7 through 10 for stats for Douglas. Over that time period, Douglas was wide receiver 28 in total points, averaging 11.1 fantasy points per game. That is enough to earn you wide receiver 3 status. And a better average over that time period than guys like Chris Godwin, Jacoby Myers, and Jerry Jeudy, all higher rostered players. And while New England has its issues, they do have one of the most wide receiver-friendly schedules rest of season. Douglas is a solid play for that 10 to 15 fantasy point range moving forward. Number 5, Zay Jones. Zay Jones' return was nothing spectacular. He did actually play, so that is the good news after missing a total of 6 games this season. Jones has been a volatile player in the past, and the preferred target for Trevor Lawrence is known to shift when all receivers are actually healthy. But we're talking about a receiver that had 82 receptions, 800 yards, and 5 touchdowns last season. That is absolutely worth a roster. Trevor Lawrence had a big bounce back game, and if he does happen to go on one of those Trevor Lawrence hot streaks, Jones could be a weekly flex option. I don't have the snap count for the Jags right now, but Jones had 4 receptions on 4 targets, and more than likely, the plan was to ease him back into action after such a long absence. Expect more out of Jones moving forward and prioritize him on waivers. Number 4, Jordan Love. Quarterbacks are dropping all over, and if you need a pivot, Jordan Love is your man. Love is often maligned because his games just straight up don't look pretty. Rarely do you see an impressive victory, and his volume usually comes with turnovers, but from a fantasy perspective, touchdowns in the Packers offense go aggressively through him, and it makes him a solid streaming option. And if the matchup calls for volume, he does have good upside. And this week's matchup against Detroit definitely calls for volume. Love is coming off a solid performance of 27 completions for 322 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is a fringe QB1 on the season. Number 3, Isaiah Likely. There's not a ton of explanation needed with this one. Mark Andrews is out for the season, and Isaiah Likely is the next man up. Andrews is irreplaceable. But because Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews, you probably didn't roster a bench option. Tight end has actually been incredibly deep this season, but the problem with that is that many fantasy managers have the luxury of rostering 2 tight ends because one can be started on a weekly basis and the other can be used as a flex option. So players went from streaming options to must rosters. You could get a guy like Cade Otton, or you could take a chance on Likely having a solid role within an offense that relies on its tight end. We do have a small sample size of Likely as a lead tight end in 2022. He had 2 touchdowns back-to-back in 2022, filling in for Mark Andrews. He also had an 8 reception game with 100 yards as well. He is a fine add with tight end 1 upside. Number 2, Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed continues to make a push for more playing time in the Packers offense. Jordan Love, as we mentioned, had a fantastic game, but that was kind of expected against the Chargers defense. But it did give us a chance to look at this Packers receiving core in ideal situation. Reed had 4 receptions on 6 targets for 46 yards, which technically was second fiddle to Romeo Doubs by a smidge, but Reed added 3 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown to be the Packers' most productive player outside of Jordan Love. The rushing aspect of Jaden Reed might actually prove to be very significant here because Aaron Jones went down with an injury. At the time of filming this video, I don't know the severity of that injury, but it didn't look like the type of injury that you bounce back from next week. Backup Emmanuel Wilson also suffered an injury. A.J. Dillon will obviously carry the bulk of the workload, but there's a reality in which Reed could have a small level of carries on a regular basis here, and that would help boost his fantasy value in a crowded receiving core. He is absolutely worth an add. Number 1, Zach Charbonnet. Kenneth Walker left the game with an oblique injury, and I don't know the exact timeline of the injury recovery as of the filming of this video, but what I do know is that the lead back going down with an injury is the exact way that Kenneth Walker gained his role last year. Walker went down early in Week 11's game, and Charbonnet had 15 carries for 47 yards, no touchdown, but he caught all 6 of his targets for 22 yards, a decent day in PPR. Even if Walker's injury isn't extreme and it's more short-term, it's still that time of year where if you've got a winning team and you're gearing up for the playoffs, you're focused on stashing high upside handcuffs. Seattle's schedule isn't exactly very running back friendly, but Charbonnet has strong receiving upside and he would be a top 20 back if he was the lead back. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to FantasyPros, and remember, if you want a chance to win a glorious 36-inch Fantasy Championship trophy for your league, courtesy of our good friends at Trophy Smack, the #1 destination for epic fantasy tournament trophies, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on this video, and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can claim your prize.